With only about a week's heads up, 343 dropped the very first Halo Infinite multiplayer flight on us, which is honestly still kinda hard to take in. After 6 years, we finally got our hands on a new Halo multiplayer, and of course I have plenty of thoughts that I want to discuss with you guys. So let's get into it and see just how Halo Infinite's multiplayer is coming along so far. When I first booted up the flight, I was met with some truly wonderful music that evoked so many emotions in me. It was just perfect, and throughout the weekend I heard glimpses of so many amazing tracks. And this isn't really a surprise since we've known for over a year just how good the soundtrack is shaping up to be, but this pretty much just confirmed it, and we also even got to hear like what sounds to be a new rendition of the Warthog Run track that was just incredible. All the music really blew me away, and I loved it. When I finally stopped listening to the music and made my way into an actual match, I could get an actual taste of what this multiplayer is offering, and I really liked it. Thankfully, this was a huge relief. I've been super worried about this game for years, but I was a big fan of the flight. I really liked it. This is coming from someone who was super critical of Halo 4 and Halo 5's multiplayers, and if you told me years ago that this is what Halo 6's multiplayer would be, I probably would have never believed you. It did really just impress me, so let's get into it. Starting with the general gunplay that just feels very clean, I think is the best way to describe it, and above all, it's just fun. This is the most non-stop I've grinded a multiplayer in a very long time, and I really think they nailed the shooting and the gunplay, for the most part. I do kind of feel like bullet magnetism is a little bit off, and could use just a tiny bit more tweaking, but overall very solid. You can still tell without a doubt that this is Halo, but it feels like a good modernization. I would describe it kind of as the movement skeleton of something more modern like Halo 5, but with the sandbox focus and gunplay that makes Halo so unique. This is something we've been talking about for years, and I think this game actually managed to give us a modern Halo that will hopefully please both camps. Spartan abilities are gone, and the movement system is something much more similar to classic Halo than, say, Super Mega, Titanfall-esque, Advanced Warfare, Infinite Warfare, wall running, Halo 5 thrusters, all that stuff. As someone that couldn't really stand Spartan abilities in Halo 5, I'm a pretty big fan of this system, at least so far. And it's not exactly like classic Halo. Obviously there's still sprint, there's still slide, clamber, and even a weird kind of version of ADS, but I don't really have a problem with these, at least not yet. In case you haven't seen the videos going around from the flight, unlike the past 3 games with sprint, in Halo Infinite sprint is just barely faster than normal walking, and not a night and day difference like you might expect. And I think this is probably the best compromise this community is gonna get. I've never really had a huge problem with sprint by itself in the franchise. I didn't really mind it in Reach, I absolutely hated how it felt in Halo 4, and I didn't like in Halo 5 how it combined with the numerous Spartan abilities, and how it really just affected map design in that game. But in Halo Infinite, I never really felt forced to use it to traverse the map, or that it was actually artificially inflating map size. It functions more as a catalyst or as a utility to slide either into or away from an encounter, or to clamber somewhere. You can also start shooting so quickly after you stop sprinting now that it kind of diluted that frustration that was in previous Halo games with sprint. This whole thing really surprised me, and at least right now, I'm pretty pleased on where movement is in this game, once again, at least for this flight. I was also curious to see how equipment would function after making its return in this game from Halo 3, and the ability to activate it whenever you want is interesting. I didn't really see any huge problems with it, but we'll have to wait and see to be sure. Probably the most hyped equipment is of course the grapple shot, the grappling hook that has been memed on for over a year, which was actually pretty cool to use. It had a way shorter range than I expected, but I don't really have too much to say on it overall. It's just a fun sandbox tool. I liked being able to grapple power weapons with it, and it worked as a fun way to enter fights. The threat sensor as well was also in the flight, which I never really felt a need to use. It just kind of highlights enemies in the range of the equipment after you throw it, but it felt kind of derivative with the outline system also in this game. Again, I could kind of see it along with some of the other equipment playing a much bigger role in really competitive or really sweaty games of doubles, or something a little bit more competitive and a little bit more slower paced than the bot stuff we got in this. I could see it playing a much bigger role. And the drop wall was fine, another iteration of the bubble shield that functions not exactly the same, but similarly to the previous ones. There were never any engagements where the fact that you could shoot out the little individual squares in it actually mattered too much, but again, we'll have to see in the final build since it's kind of hard to tell, especially playing against bots. Speaking of the bots, these were surprisingly competent, and a lot more fun to fight than I thought they would be. You can obviously tell they're bots, the fact that they grouped up all the time, and they just didn't act completely like, real people. You could tell, but they were better than I expected, and they could even teabag, so yes, that's awesome. I'm really happy that's in there. The very brief time we did get to actually play PvP was awesome though, and certainly a pretty different experience. Also included in the flight were a number of different weapons, some legacy ones and some newcomers, but I will just hit on some of the highlights. I really like the AR, although it did seem very strong, maybe just a little bit tweaking there might be needed. The sidearm obviously got a terrible reception when it was first revealed, but in this flight, I thought it was weird. I do really like it. I think it's fun to use. The fast reload speed just contributes to like so much adrenaline and a rush in the combat loop that it's really fun to use. But I still don't know if I'm sold on this replacing the Magnum as a start for many arena matches. I do like it though, and the new redesign obviously is much better than the one we saw in the gameplay demo last year. And the BR sound for me is still taking some getting used to, but the design is just A+, perfect, everything I've ever wanted. Look at this thing, it is perfect. The Needler is also a blast to use as well and has a great design. The Pulse Carbine I thought was actually surprisingly cool. Visually, I think it looks like a Halo weapon, decently satisfying to use. One weapon that didn't really do it for me though was the Commando Rifle. It's got a really like flat design to it. I just did not enjoy the way it handled whatsoever, so that weapon personally didn't do it for me. And then the Grav Hammer, unfortunately, was the biggest disappointment when it comes to the weapons of the flight. The sound design of this thing is not there at all for me. It's lacking the punch it needs as well as the gravity effects that need to be there when you swing it. It just feels so nerfed whenever you use it, and is in definite need of an upgrade, and if they can just fix that, because I love the Grav Hammer, it's such a unique weapon, I love the design in most of the games, and kind of the sound design, and obviously the effects, and it should feel powerful, and I just didn't feel that in this flight. The weapon sandbox, for the most part though, is looking great, and the Academy is also a very cool feature. It's not super groundbreaking right now, but it's definitely a great way to let new and old players get used to the game's weapons, and I am excited to see what they do with it in the future. Let's also hit on a few things that came up during matches, and this is where some of my biggest problems with the flight are. Starting with the UI. I do not think I'm a fan whatsoever. I do not like this. I didn't like it when it started, and I never really got used to it. Moving the weapon icon to the bottom right, and especially having the scoreboard down there in the center as well, just no, please. It feels way too crowded. It didn't do it for me. Also, medals. What happened? What is this? What did they do to medals? The designs of many of them are really bland, and not only that, but they're so tiny. You barely notice when they pop up on screen, and any feeling of accomplishment or excitement that you should get when you get medals isn't felt. For me, some of my fondest memories of Reach are receiving all the colorful and exciting medals during games, and having new ones pop up that I'd never seen before. For me, medals need a drastic overhaul before this game launches later this year. This game also is the first in the series to ditch the classic red versus blue coloring for multiplayer, which I'm still conflicted on. I like more emphasis being put on seeing your customized Spartan, I think that's great, but I'm not loving this outline system in Halo Infinite so far. It's great that there's so many options when it comes to the setting of this system, like how you can change the colors of the friendlies, of the enemies, and all that stuff, because when I first booted up the flight, I found it kinda insanely difficult to tell my teammates from the enemy players. This was improved once I swapped some colors around, but I still just don't like the look of these outlines being in the game, and I don't think I'm fully on board with this change yet. I also wouldn't complain if they added service tags back above players' heads during matches, since their absence was sorely felt during the flight. Also, the outlines sometimes showed up in the outros, which I'm assuming is just a bug, so I'm not really going to worry about it. Speaking of though, these outros and intros are awesome. I really like these. They kind of remind me, if you guys remember, the ones from the Halo 5 beta, but those I felt like were kind of weird and they didn't really go with the tone of the Halo 5 multiplayer, but these are a little bit more serious and I just really like them. Granted, they were glitched for about 50% of the matches I played, or they were just really awkward and felt kinda off and like they weren't done, but obviously it's a flight, nothing's finalized. I did get the idea of them though, and I appreciate their inclusion in this game. I just want there to be enough variety between the outros and the intros, where they don't get old a week after the game launches. Also new to Infinite is removing team collision and friendly fire, which I also wasn't a huge fan of. I guess the best way to describe it is it just feels artificial. It kind of takes you out of the match when you're just running through teammates and you're not actually colliding with them. And nothing you do even phases them. Obviously no friendly fire, which, sure, I guess that's nice that you're not actually killing your teammates with grenades, but that's never been a big enough problem where I would just want the feature removed altogether. I just hope they consider reworking this a little bit. I want that in the game, because it just felt so off running through teammates, and I didn't like it. One added feature I do love is that you can now ping. This is great, this is awesome, I love this, this should really be a staple of any FPS that releases now. I'm happy about it, and once again, I didn't find a huge use for it in this flight, but I feel like in more competitive situations, it would be insanely helpful. Also, you can now drop weapons, which I didn't really expect them to add, and I never really felt a huge need to use in this flight, but again, I could see situations in the future, and even stuff like machinimas or content creation or even anything like that, where this will be a really cool feature. I just like that the option's there. I never did it by accident or anything. I just think this is a cool idea, and I'm happy they added it. Also new to Infinite are these personal AIs, which I liked, kind of. They're a neat idea, but I felt like audio was a little cluttered during matches. You've got Jeff Steitzer's wonderful voice calling out medals, you've got your personal AI calling out weapon drops, and then you have other Spartans in-game calling out equipment and stuff like that. Not to mention I found a few of the AIs and Spartan voices just kind of annoying and like they didn't really need to be there. I guess the best way to adjust this would be to just have settings that disable the different voices separately, and hopefully that'll alleviate the problem. Well, again, we'll have to see in the final build if that's as prevalent. Also, the maps I all thought were pretty solid in this flight. Bazaar and Live Fire were definitely my favorites, with Recharge being pretty enjoyable as well. And I think that brings the general gameplay stuff to a close, but of course that is not everything because we need to touch on customization and progression. Customization, as we've known for almost a year, looks phenomenal. The most variety we've seen in this series since Reach, and all the armors look very neat from an artistic standpoint. The addition of the prosthetics and gloves as well are all super cool. I love everything when it comes to this. Everything about the armors themselves looking great. I still am getting used to the customization UI, but I'm just going to assume it's an adjustment thing and it's not really a problem right now. What I don't love, however, is coatings. Shocker, I know, still. I feel like a broken record at this point, but only being able to choose through a number of pre-selected color combinations is not the way to go. This is dumb. I do not like this as I haven't liked it for the past year. This is taking away from player control and changing a system that has worked perfectly fine for years. Especially when you could do coatings in a way where they're only patterns that you unlock and you're still able to change the primary and secondary colors that the patterns are used for. It's just super frustrating that we're still talking about this close to release, and obviously it looks like there's no changing it now. Let's just hope that the process to unlock these coatings isn't broken by the free-to-play monetization. Also, armor cores. These worry me, again, because it seems like another way to restrict what exactly players are equipping, which again I'm sure is due to the monetization system of the game. Armor kits do seem cool though, which are basically a pre-selected kit that you'll be able to unlock and equip the armor and colors of. For example, there might be a George armor kit or a Kelly armor kit where you'll be able to wear their colors and you'll be able to wear their armor, and I think this is a very cool idea. Once again though, I don't want them to do something stupid like restrict all coatings and armors behind these kits and that's the only way you can unlock them. I don't feel like they do that, but there's still a lot we don't know about this system, so it still scares me. Also, emblems once again seem like their customization will be a far cry from what it once was in Reach, so that's pretty disappointing. I just want to be able to make my own emblem in-game. I don't want to have to go buy a Butterfinger and then unlock an in-game emblem. That sucks. I just don't want that to be the case. Speaking of unlocking, progression did not really impress me in general in this flight. We've known for a while now that this would probably be the case, but I was really hoping it wouldn't be. Yes, it's great that battle passes will never expire and that you'll always be able to unlock the items from them. But in general, I just don't really find this form of unlocking content very satisfying. I also don't like that the Battle Pass is the only thing that's there. There's no pure experience leveling system that's disconnected from it. You progress in the Battle Pass when you complete challenges, or you can buy your way through with a digital currency that I'm sure you'll be able to purchase with real-world dollars. The whole thing just really scares me, and especially when I booted up the in-game store, and it just looked like your typical standard free-to-play, colorful, microtransaction-riddled store mess. It just made me really nervous, and I hope that the focus on the Battle Pass doesn't discourage me from wanting to play in the final release, because like I said, I do really like the gameplay, but implementing a free-to-play progression system like this is a dangerous game, and I'm just hoping for the best. So that'll do it for the first Halo Infinite multiplayer flight, and I had so much fun. 343 really did impress me more than I thought they would, and this game is looking to hit almost every nail on the head that us longtime fans would want. The campaign is looking incredible, and after getting to play multiplayer finally, I can say that it for sure is looking like what I want. The sandbox, movement, and weapons feel just about perfect, and most of the customization is more expansive than I could have ever dreamed of. But there are still some changes with the outline system, sound design, and especially progression that really scare me. Just like we've known for the longest time with this game, the free-to-play nature of it is both a gift and a curse. I'm just hoping that the monetization isn't too bad, that it drags down the rest of what looks to be an excellent game. If you guys were able to play the flight, let me know what you thought of it, and if you agreed or disagreed with my praises and my criticisms. Thank you all for watching, Majestic Gaming.